my mom actually started her life the modern way and then went off grid, became a survivalist, and lived years without electricity or running water. A lot of people are interested in survivalism right now, fending for themselves. So I am going to bring my mom on and she can tell you guys how she did it. So you guys are armed and ready to do it too. Now, I didn't realize my viewers were so interested in this until I read a recent ad. Turns out World Economic Forum has been doing several events on averting a cyber pandemic, which would be when a hacker comes in and shuts down modern technology and prevents our power grid from working and all that. So World Economic Forum has been hosting events like this, and I'll just show you one quick clip of them. Here they are talking about it.
A very warm welcome to everyone to this special on averting a cyber pandemic. This is the fourth day of the Davos Virtual Week.
Okay, talking about averting a cyber pandemic. Now, that was last year. Now, in 2019, World Economic Forum, in conjunction with Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation and Johns Hopkins University, hosted Event 201, in which they talked about how to avert a viral pandemic. It was just months after that that a real viral pandemic took place and happened exactly how they had, planned in Event 201. So it freaked a lot of people out. I guess that is why a lot of people are now really concerned with them planning on what to do if there's a cyber pandemic. People are worried this shutdown of the power grid is really going to happen. So with that being said, I'm going to bring my mom on and she'll talk about how exactly she purposely lived without power. Before we get into it, I got to shout out the sponsor that spurred all of this conversation, sponsored my news coverage. So are you ready for Blackout Day? If you're not familiar with it, you should be. The federal regulators of U.S. electricity believe a colossal terrorist attack capable of completely wiping out the power grid and sending us back into a dark age could happen at any moment. They've dubbed this attack Blackout Day. When Blackout Day occurs, steps must be taken within 30 minutes. These steps are outlined in this explosive free video. This video guides you step by step with instructions on producing your own electricity, whether from water, wind, the sun, or more. Thousands of satisfied customers have peace of mind knowing that they're prepared for Blackout Day thanks to this amazing how-to video. Try, review, and learn to protect against the dark age. Watch the free video by going to the link down in my description, darkageprotection.com. Darkageprotection.com. Check it out. Okay, with that being said, I'm going to bring on my mom, Renee Hecker, the survivalist. Mom, thanks for joining me. When you married my dad, he was a survivalist, and so you went off grid too. So how did you make that switch to going without electricity and running water?
It was really simple for me, and I have no explanation for that except that I've been ready for a change. My life was pretty much a leave it to beaver lifestyle, meaning my dad with a steady Honeywell job, and my mom was a stay-at-home mom and lived in a nice suburb growing up, and everything was same old for the first 20 years of my life. And then I met your dad, and he lived up in the northern wilderness of Minnesota on 1,000 acres up there off the grid, and asked me to marry him. So I said yes, and I must have been ready for an adventure because it was just as easy as turning a page in a book. I just jumped right in. And I think people wondered how I was going to do because I was pretty much a city girl with no experience on that.
Yeah, people are wondering, how do you turn the lights on? How do you heat your house in the winter or cool your house in the summer? How do you cook? All those things. So how'd you do it?
So, well, Dad in 6 weeks' time, he logged out wood from the forest up there, and they had a sawmill. So they sawed the wood up from the wood he logged out with his horse team that he had. And of course, he had help. A bunch of different people gathered together, maybe a little bit like the Amish do in house raising. Not quite quite that, but 6 weeks time we had our little cabin. It was just a little 24 by 12 inch feet, 24 by 12 house. Well, it can't be feet. What am I talking about? Is it? Yeah, maybe.
Is it?
12 by 24. 12 by 24. Yeah, must have been feet. So not a very big house, but it had living room on one side, kitchen on the other, and the upstairs was our bedroom. It was a barn-shaped house. And we drove a point for a well, and 90 feet down, I think it was, we hit water and had really good water. And
Wait, how do you drill for a well on your own?
well, we drove a point. So I don't know, your dad, I wasn't there, but what is it's not drilling for it. So probably other people would understand that better than I do, but take a point down there, I guess, and keep hounding it. No, I wasn't there to do it, but we drove a point, is what Dad would say. So a hand pump like this, and learned how to prime the pump, pour water in, to prime it, to get it going, and keep pumping and pumping. Learning to do that was a challenge. I used to start laughing to your dad with a little frustration. It's like, it seems like I'm pouring in as much water as I'm getting out. He'd say, keep trying. And I had.
So you had to pump. Oh, you'd pump the well for water every day. No actual plumbing.
Yeah, into like 5-gallon buckets and bring it in the house. And then we'd just have 5-gallon buckets under the kitchen sink to collect the water. We didn't have a drain out. Eventually we had to drain out, but, and had, big wash tubs, just like in the old days with the plunger. I would plunge with the plunger and wash the clothes, and then have a hand wringer, feed the clothes through to wring the water out of them and hang them on the line.
Wow.
And boil them on the wood cook stove. I learned how to cook on the wood cook stove, and there was a definite learning curve there. I had my share of burnt food and burnt bread and things like that. But eventually I learned how to control the heat, by closing the damps down, and so that no air is feeding the fire, and hold the temperature there.
So you would strictly warm the house in the winter with burning wood in the stove.
So on the other side, in the kitchen, have the cook stove, and on the opposite side of the chimney, we had the heater stove that we would use. And yeah, strictly for that. So learn how to keep the fires going and start the fire, and keep them going through the night, and getting up in the night to feed them, to keep the house warm during some of the 20 below zero weather days.
Ooh, up in Minnesota. Wow.
So, and here in Wisconsin. Learned how to, in time, Dad cleared a big place, cleared the trees out with his horse, and formed a big garden up there, and had an amazing garden. Middle of the wilderness. And so I learned how to preserve the food by canning it. Couldn't freeze it there.
Wow.
How to can meat and vegetables, and I dehydrated some things up there. And of course we bought our food, so I'd buy 50 pounds of flour, and buy 5-gallon buckets of honey, 5-gallon buckets of peanut butter, 50 to 100 pounds of oatmeal at a time.
And that wouldn't go bad?
Well, of course, half the time up there, the whole outdoors is a freezer. So it's preserved because we keep it outside in a shed, and in a place where the animals couldn't get into it and things. So that's the one perk of living in the North Country, is that half the year you have your own freezer. No electricity needed in that. Learned how to, before I married and moved up there, I got a good wardrobe of just warm clothes, warm boots, and, whole different kind of wardrobe that I didn't need down in the cities with electricity and things. And
then lighting at night. How'd you do it?
Yeah, the kerosene lamps. We had our share of kerosene lamps, and those you just when I first moved up there, I would just have the lamps lit in the room that we were using, kind of with the same mentality of my mom always, only turn the lights on to save electricity on the rooms that you're in. After a while, your dad said, I really like a lit up house. So then I began to put lamps all in all the different rooms, and you just light them and keep them lit so that, you can't just walk into a room and flip the switch. So that way you can walk in, the room's lit up, ready, waiting for you. And you just have a different schedule because you can't see as well with that kind of lighting, and it kind of makes you go to bed earlier. Um, you don't have as much to do. So you get up when the sun gets up and you go to bed closer to when the sun goes down. And
Wow. Yeah. So you didn't get electricity till I was about 10.
you're 2000.
So I grew up with those kerosene lamps, a little glass jar with kerosene in it with the wick. You just turn the knob to have the wick high enough to light a match on it. And then you've got that little flame, and enough lamps can light up your house, but not very well.
Yeah, and there's some that burn a little brighter. I'm trying to think. There's a certain name to them. I can't remember it now, but and so you have to maintain them. You gotta keep trimming the wicks because it gets charred on the edge. I mean, on the top of it. You gotta keep cleaning those chimneys because they get clouded over, and keep filling your lamps up, and your kids learning curve of not touching the lamps because they're very hot on the top. And teaching your kids not to touch the wood stove and to be careful around that. And my arms became pretty scarred at one point from the stove and hitting the top place where you pushed the wood in there. And
On the stove. Oh, wow.
And that's where we heated it for baths. When I had 10 children, I'd heat the water up on the wood stove and one by one carry up 5-gallon buckets of water for them into the bathtub up there, pour it in there for them.
And then to complete the plumbing, there was an outhouse.
Yeah, so we lived with an outhouse till 2006. So a long time. We got electricity in year 2000, but that was mainly because your dad wanted to get buffalo. And I told him I've chased horses and cows and pigs, but I am not going to chase buffalo when they break out. So that was the reason we brought electricity back, not for ourselves, but for fencing, stronger electric wire fencing for having buffalo. But
wow,
as long as we had it back there, we decided to use it ourselves.
Wow. Yeah, we raised cattle, and my dad would shoot one steer every so often and get it butchered, and then we'd have that fresh meat.
Yeah.
That would be frozen out in the snow in the winter. That's how it would stay good.
Yeah.
Until we had electricity. It's crazy.
Another thing I liked doing was sewing before I met and married Dad. And so when I moved up to northern Minnesota, someone gave me a treadle machine. And so I learned to sew on the treadle machine, and would make clothes for Dad and clothes for myself on that. And when I started having children, though, all the wheels turning on a treadle machine, my little babies and toddlers would hang so close to me, I had to switch to another way. I just didn't do as much sewing anymore, and instead learned to braid rugs. That was something I could sit among you little kids, and you could sit by me and not really mess up anything. I could braid my rugs. And so did that for a while, and would sell those braided rugs and kind of earn some extra income.
Wow.
Learned a lot about animals. Only living in the city and having a dog and a cat, I didn't really know much about all of the farm animals and things. And so learned how to deal with those. Your dad would sometimes use the draft horses for like tilling between the rows and things. And I remember one time had me leading the draft horses for him while he had the tiller behind, telling me what to do. And I said to said to Dad, "They're leading me. I'm not leading them."
Those horses are huge. Their one hoof is like this big.
Yeah, and fell and it stepped on me and all those things. So,
Wow. So everybody, it can be done.
yeah, if the little city,
My parents did it. I did it as a kid. I just hung in there as I was introduced to survivalism from birth until we modernized after I hit my double digits. Okay, so I have a couple of viewer questions for you about the lifestyle, the survivalist lifestyle. So one, what's most important, shelter or finding a source of water first? Like, let's say this blackout, the cyber pandemic happens abruptly. Do you need to find shelter or a source of water, number one?
I guess I would say water that you need. And one thing about where, when you live in the city, it's so survival to me is so much more difficult. We have always lived in the North Woods and North Woods, and right now in the country. Before it was in the wilderness. Now we live in the country. So it's a community of farmers and people, and we all have our chunks of land that we can have our gardens on and have our animals. But also, not that far from me is an artesian well. So when the electricity has gone out, we go down there to the artesian well and have a good source of fresh, amazing tasting water.
What's an artesian well?
An artesian well is a well, a spring from the ground that continually flows.
Oh, wow.
The water
They're in everybody. My mom lives in Wisconsin. I didn't realize that wells like that were in Wisconsin, almost like a hot spring but cold.
but cold fresh water. We have one now,
Wow.
and there's another one in another direction. So how buried they are scattered, but kind of some memories of living in the country, and it's so much more, survival is so much easier in the country, in my opinion. Being shut down and you not have busy. But yeah, I would
Well,
say water is the first priority. You're going to need that, and
water
yeah,
for sure. When the pandemic hit in 2020, so many people switched to working from home. A lot of them realized we can move out of the city. I don't have to live close to work anymore.
yeah.
So a lot of people have left the city. I know in Houston, tons of people, even my own co-workers at the time back at Fox, were ditching the city, moving deep into the burbs. So maybe that's a good thing that more people have moved away from the city and they'll have a better surrounding to be a survivalist if, God forbid, it comes to that. So I have a question about homeschooling, because you also homeschooled us kids. Total survivalism. You don't even need the school system in my mom's book. So this question, what was her experience with homeschooling like? Any advice for new parents?
Homeschooling is so much easier than you may think. And for myself, because my husband and I wanted a large family, to me, homeschooling was going to be easier than getting everybody shoes and coats and boots and school books and get them out the door to to school or to the bus stop in time. We could just get up in the morning, the kids come down, have their breakfast, and then usually all my kids would sit in the living room and we'd start the day, read to them. Usually a biography or autobiography, a book of interest. We went through like the Little House on the Prairie series and things, and then everybody pick up their books and start, and they each knew what they had to do. I would have it laid out for them for the year, what they needed to do every day in their books. And I chose a curriculum. It was actually the same curriculum that I used when I was in school from third grade to graduating. My parents actually pulled me out in my 11th and 12th grade year of school to homeschool me when homeschool was just beginning back in the early 80s. And that's curriculum is the ACE, Curriculum Accelerated Christian Education, out of Texas, I believe. And it's a self-teaching. So once I get my kids to read and get their basics down with their numbers and things, they can start taking off, and they're kind of self-teaching. And I'm guiding them through in the things that they don't understand. And it's such a peaceful experience. And some of the kids are self-motivated. Some of them I have to give a talking to once a month of why we have to do school, why this is important. But to me too, I can pick and choose what I feel is important to them and can discard the things that I feel like, even individually, I can see my kids' giftings and talents and their interests, and I can incorporate it to them. And I'm doing a little more of that now. I've said in the last years, but I feel like they pretty much have their basics up for that they're going to use every day in their practical living. And the other years, you can start gearing them towards what their giftings are, what their interests are in life, and kind of capitalize on that, making, instead of just cookie cutters, making everybody do the same thing. And I get to build a relationship with my kids, and I find such delight in these last years when I see my last 4 children are boys. And they will come to me, and while I'm getting ready in the morning, putting my makeup on or whatever, and doing things in my room, they'll come in and just sit and talk to me and tell me about their day and what's happening and maybe what they're being challenged with. And as they're talking, I think, how lucky am I that my kids come and will tell me these things because I've spent every day with them. I had in my thinking, I was going to have a bunch of children because I wanted to raise them. I didn't want someone else doing it all. And I wanted to do life with them. So it has been one of the best decisions I ever made. I just am so proud of my kids, so proud of how each of them is turning out and their level of responsibility and drive and ambition. So many of them have started their own businesses, and it's not because they have all this great education, meaning from somebody who had, I didn't have a college degree or anything, but I poured my heart and soul into my kids, and I gave them the basics they need. And when you have the basics, you teach your kids the basics, they can take those basics and then capitalize on that and delve into the things that they love to learn. So teaching them life skills of being hardworking, diligent, disciplined, self-disciplined, motivating themselves. I think we get to teach those to our kids when we homeschool. For one thing, we're that example to them. And
Well, you homeschooled me
mm-hmm.
all the way, kindergarten through 12th grade, and
Yeah.
that prepared me enough to land me at one of the most elite journalism schools in the nation, Syracuse University, where I have my degree from. So there you go, guys.
Yeah.
It can be done with a self-instructing course. Every day I was pretty much self-guiding myself and just turning to you when I was puzzled about something, or when you had to check my test, test at the end of the grade or whatever. Mm-hmm. So yeah, it's totally doable, and it wasn't that expensive. People are always like, I can't afford it.
No, it probably per child, the curriculum was $150 maybe per child. But
per year.
There's so many charter schools, and we used, when you entered high school, I enrolled different ones of you in the charter school, which we basically did the same thing. Just I would turn my records into them, and they provided different money for curriculum and things like that.
Nice.
So there's
and with that, we still primarily homeschooled.
Yeah,
We were officially enrolled in charter school, but we were homeschooling. And then if I wanted to, I could take a class or two at the high school.
right,
So,
connected us so that you could do sports there if you wanted to and things. So there's a lot of charter schools now, I think, out there, and they all kind of operate differently. But yeah.
exactly. Track was my thing, guys.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so final question. Why? Why would you be a survivalist like that? Why would you do that sort of lifestyle? And also, how did you get drinking water, food, shelter, wipe with? What did you wipe with? Periods? Oh, wow.
Well, we still had cars. We did back on the land when we lived up in northern Minnesota. We used it was Nate's dad's parents, your grandparents that owned the 1,000 acres. And their idea was to gradually give some of the acreage to the children. But there was a rule there that your grandmother had that the cars had to be parked at a certain place. And then beyond that place, it was just horse and buggy and things. So we would use the horse and buggy to move things from point A to point B and things like that. And when we got snowed in the winter, the horses would take us out to wherever the cars would have to be parked even further out. We were 20 miles back from the nearest paved road. And what was I saying on that?
Why'd you guys do it? Why live that lifestyle?
I think
I have a rule about horses and buggies.
Yeah. I think it was the experience for Dad and I, in doing that, just trying it and see how it is and seeing if you can do it. The challenge of it, for your grandparents, it was going to be a place where people from the cities could come and just get back to simple living and simple values and get back to the basics of family and spending time together. There's just, in the modern day world, there are so many things always tugging at you and tugging you away from presence. I mean, just the cell phones in itself. I've been so thankful that they didn't exist when most of my children were young, because they are so distracting. And life being simpler means you get to be more present and with the people that you're with and just the very things that you're doing. And so much of the simple life, the things that you're doing, your mind can be free and just present in what you're doing. It's not complicated. The canning, preserving of foods, you're just thinking and you're in the moment. And
survivalism sounds kind of complicated.
It's not.
I guess once you get it down, it's probably really simple.
It's not as complicated as people think. Probably it's simple. It's just not always easy. So when you get snowed in way back there and you have to sometimes shovel your way through things and all the different things. Our house got struck by lightning and burned to the ground. And so there we are. What are we going to do? We've lost most everything. It takes a lot of grit. It takes a lot of, sometimes a lot of courage. And I was thinking when I was thinking to doing this with you that it takes somebody that has grit, mental grit, courage, and someone who likes a challenge. You don't have to do that. It is a good question. Why? And there are just simply people who love a challenge. Why climb a mountain? It's the challenge of it, and when you accomplish it and you get to the top, you have that amazing wow feeling. And I think after a while, Dad and I experienced that. And then we kind of thought, wouldn't it be interesting to go to the other side and see if we can do really well materially, have and with having well, because having plenty and abundance and enjoying the luxuries that life has to give, because there's another skill set that it takes to have a lot and do it well. Different having very little and being able to survive and do it well.
It's so true.
It is such a challenge.
Okay, she asked about what to wipe with and what about your periods?
Yeah, we went to the store. I guess that's what I was saying before. We went to the grocery store and got basics, still. It wasn't, we weren't that much survival. I mean, it really had to be that much survival. I'm sure for periods and things, you'd have to use cloths. I think that's what they did in the olden days. And,
Ooh, wouldn't want to wash those.
no. I did diapers by hand. We had cloth diapers, and it is when you are living the survival life, not those things and not the nicest experience. But like I said, it's simple, but it's just not always easy or fun. Some of that. For wiping, there's a whole host of my window of leaves on trees out there if you need to.
Oh my gosh!
Another thing.
Grab the leaves.
Another thing that's I've tried to have on hand is when you're being a survivalist, what are you going to do when health issues come up and you can't just run to the doctor? So I have on hand things like activated charcoal for food poisoning or stomach issues. I have a potent tonic that I make at home and keep on hand. It's a cultured tonic that's supposed to be one of the most powerful antibiotics, natural antibiotics, and I have that on hand.
Another powerful natural antibiotic is just straight fresh garlic.
Straight garlic.
Just mince it up and wash it down with water.
Yeah, it's amazing. It's actually been like a lifesaver at times between that tonic and just fresh garlic.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
Nature can heal you guys. There's so many simple health hacks.
What was the book that I got you for Christmas?
The Lost Book of Remedies.
The Lost Book of Remedies. And you look in that book and all the different plants and things that have healing properties. When I looked at that, I thought, I have so many right on my bike route. I do a 16-mile bike route. And so many of those plants that have healing properties are right on that bike route that I could just go out my door and pick.
Including burdock,
yeah.
Which is just like a cocklebur, like a prickly weed, but its root system is powerfully healing. Yeah. I guess we got this from the Native Americans, and it's known to do something for cancer. Can't talk about it on YouTube, but look into it.
Yeah, the blood cleanser. Anyways, there's so another perk of living in the country, that you have all those resources right there to you, for you. When we had like very little at times, I would go out and in the country here is like random apple trees growing because farmers, I think, probably threw their apple cores while they were on their track. So I gleaned from those just along the edge of random woods. That we have the berries, the raspberries, blackberries, wild blueberries.
Yeah, Little House on the Prairie, they lived in Wisconsin as well, right?
They did, yeah.
Yeah, so Wisconsin's a good survivalist state. They have a lot of natural plants, berries, like you said, to eat. It just gets very cold.
Wild plums, yeah. Yeah, you got to be prepared for the heat. And, for the cold. You better have your heat.
Yeah, surviving the heat is the problem in Texas here.
Heat down there, yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Mom, for coming on. Renee Hecker, everybody, instilling wisdom on how to survive if we choose to go that route now or are forced to go that route later. You can follow my mother on Instagram. She gives a lot of life advice there. She's a life coach. Link down in description for Wing It Mom on Instagram at Wing It Mom. All right. Thanks so much, Mom, and we'll talk to you soon.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Yep. Bye.